Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Sfarim Chatter podcast. On this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined by R Yosef Gavriel Bechhofer, who's a Rav and a Dayan in Monsey, and Mechaber Sfarim, an author of various Sfarim, and also the contemporary Erev, I think that's what it's called, right, in English as well. We'll be discussing an article that he wrote and a topic that people may be familiar with, but kind of not, which is the fake forged Yerushalmi that came out 20th century, right? So thank you, Rabbi Bechhofer, for joining me.
You're welcome. Sure, pleasure.
Let's start off. Tell the listeners about yourself and your background.
I grew up in West Hempstead, New York, and went to many different yeshivas of many different types. And in the late 1980s, I started living in Koilo, first lived in Koilo in Far Rockaway, and then in Chicago for many years. And I started writing on topics which interested me. And one of my early articles was something I heard about in yeshiva several years ago about the forged Yerushalmi on Kodshim, and this piqued my interest. This is something which I wrote about twice. I wrote about in Far Rockaway, and then when I was in Koil there, and then later on a more expanded version, which is the article which appeared in the Skokie Yeshiva's Torah Journal, or Shmuel, in which I went into greater depth. And since then, I've been in the early 2000s, just before September 11th, I moved to Monsey. I've been in Monsey ever since. Since I learned with Chabrusas, I teach in Passaic, and I try to still write and to learn as much as I possibly can.
Okay, so you said you were drawn to the forged Yerushalmi. I think also Yerushalmi itself, right, is something that you're interested in. I mean, how?
I would say, I was going to say this later on, maybe I'll save it, that now that I've learned Yerushalmi several times over, and since you asked me about myself, I'll do some shameless self-promotion and mention that if you go to YerushalmiOnline.org, you can get all of my shurim on the entire Yerushalmi, 750 shurim, and you can, Baruch Hashem, several people have, I would say a few dozen, have finished Yerushalmi using my shurim, which I hope is one of the schlusim which will get me to Olam Haba. And that was from my first time around. And now I'm on my fifth time around. And I can tell you, it's clearly would be much easier to forge Yerushalmi than a Bavli. And maybe we'll come back to that later on, unless you want to talk about it now, why it's easier to forge Yerushalmi than a Bavli.
I think, well, we can save that. I guess it's a good question as we get into the what happened there. So, I mean, I was going to ask you, like, how in general, something you got into Yerushalmi, you just mentioned you have a lot of shiurim, you went through it many times. I mean, it's interesting. Many people today, even if they finish Shas, they go through Bavli, they don't learn Yerushalmi. I mean, why was that something you were drawn to?
Either Rabbi, I started learning Yerushalmi. I gave a Daf Yomi shir in Chicago, and as we came to the end of the Machzor, which was in 1997. Towards the end, it happened to be that there began a new Yerushalmi Machzor. And I figured, you know what? There's no time like the present. So I think, I don't remember how long, it was only 6 months before the end of the Machzor. And I had around 18 people came to my Yerushalmi shir, to my Bavli Daf Yomi shir in the morning, and 3 or 4 of them started coming at night. And we did Yerushalmi. And I don't understand why it's not a natural progression, right? If anybody who finished Bavli should want to then go on to Yerushalmi. So I don't even understand the Havamina not to do it. Back then, at the time of the Siyum, the Jewish Observer put out a special issue for the Siyum Daf Yomi Bavli, and I wrote an article there, the other Daf Yomi, about the Yerushalmi and how we were learning it and what the good tools were to learn it. And the truth is that now that there's a commentary of Chaim Kanievsky, forget about ArtScroll. ArtScroll maybe some is too complicated. But now as a commentator of Chaim Kanievsky on Yerushalmi, there's no excuse not to learn Yerushalmi anymore. I want to say, but at the same time, Yerushalmi is much more fun than Bavli. Because with Bavli, you can't be a Rishon. You have Rishonim already. You have to deal with them. Rashi, Tosfos, the Rambam, certainly the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva. But in Yerushalmi, there are no Rishonim. And since there are no Rishonim, except here and there, so therefore you can be a Rishon. And it's a big nafkamina. In other words, in the Bavli, you cannot be Sholeach Yad. At the last person to be Sholeach Yad in the Bavli really was the Gra, before in the Bach. but in the Yerushalmi, that's a free for all. And one of the great pleasures you can have in learning Yerushalmi is you can do a girsa change, which is less tampering with the text than the Pnei Moshe or the Korban Eidah, and makes you feel good.
Interesting. I was going to mention that there are a number of tools now because Yerushalmi, part of the problem probably is the actual just understanding, the teaching it, to be able to understand the words for a lot of people. But now, like you mentioned, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, which is not on the whole Yerushalmi yet.
But it's growing.
Yeah. Most, and I think someone put it inside. I know it's in some of them. There's the art scroll right to Hebrew English, and then you have the Hamar, which is very nice. Also has the whole thing. I think also put the Reb Chaim Kanievsky. They have like that Mesechtas kind of Yerushalmi, the whole set.
Yeah, well, that's really the old Yerushalmi just repackaged. But there's also a bunch of there's a Lev Yerushalayim commentary from two Ger Hasidim, who I actually. I remember I wrote about this in the Jewish Observer about this or somewhere else about this commentary, and then they were very grateful to me. They wrote about it, and then when Tzvi Reisman from Los Angeles saw my article and gave them a tremendous nudava. So my schus, they got this tremendous nudava. I did not get any commission. And there's a whole machon in Arad right now, with also Ger Hasidim working on a tremendous, incredible Yerushalmi. That's the size of the many other editions you need. Nefesh. There are lots of editions of Yerushalmi. Now, there's no reason why people should not learn Yerushalmi.
I want to just clarify. No, the Hamar is like a Mesechta kind of thing. It's like they have just when they did it's a whole set, 20 volumes, the whole thing. It's like a Mesechta of Yerushalmi.
Yeah,
that's what I'm pointing out.
I think there's 1.5 here.
That is the.
It's a different one, I guess. This is Moreh Or.
Yeah, so Ma'ari R is the one that so we're talking a little different Yerushalmis for everybody. The Ma'ari R is the repackaged old one, and then you have Oiz V'Hadar has now like I think it's 10. I don't remember how many volumes. There's like they have two different ones. They have one that's just like it's like that with a little bit extra stuff, and then they have one that they never finished, which is like all Mefarshim. It's like the real fancy ones. That's only very tall, and it's not available. I didn't finish yet. But anyways,
which is useful, which most people don't have. I'm sorry, once you're talking about it. So I don't know if I need to say this anymore, but this is, I know people can't see it, but I have in my hands the Ksav Yad Leiden, the only full manuscript of the Yerushalmi in the world. And a lot of times you can look in here and get incredible girsos, which help you a lot. And I want to tell you something which perhaps I should not tell you. But one of the most incredible Perushim on the Yerushalmi is by Shaul Lieberman. He has a book called Yerushalmi Kipshuto on Shabbos, Erev, and Pesachim, which is an incredible sefer.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously controversial somewhat, so that's what you're saying I should say. But okay, so that's what the Yerushalmi's Mefarshim. Now, getting back to Rabbi Friedlander-Elgazi. So Elgazi Friedlander, whatever he called himself. Anyway, before we even get into him, I want to ask you something. I mean, he came up with this idea of the fake Yerushalmi Kodshim. And you mentioned, which we'll discuss, about why it's easier to forge. But just, I think one thing that also should be emphasized here was there ever a Yerushalmi Kodshim? Did it ever exist? And we just don't have it? Or was it never written? And he's just like, hey, I invented it,
There reminding that it did exist. There's like a Ravid who seems to mention that there's Yerushalmi and Kodshim, that he had Yerushalmi and Kodshim. There is no definite Messiah that it did exist. There are Ramazim here and there that perhaps one did exist, but not for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about the famous and infamous author. Maybe people do know or don't know. His name is Shlomo Yehuda or Yehuda, as he wrote it there, Friedlander-Elgazi. So what is this interesting character?
The best line, I think, in the entire article is that this article is mostly based on Rabbi Kusiel Yehuda Greenwald, who was the Rav in Columbus, Ohio, and wrote the Kol Avelus, who earlier, of course, had been learning in his home country of Hungary. And I think at the end of the article, I bring down there that he asked him why you came. He asked Gazi Friedlander, why did you come to Hungary and not go somewhere else? And he said, because the Hungarians are gullible and will believe anything. So it is hard to believe hard to accept how the Hungarians actually fell for it. I think Bismana said it wouldn't happen anymore. Nobody would contemplate that this fellow Elgazi Friedlander was authentic. Right? I think back then, when people didn't travel as much and people didn't have so much exposure, perhaps it was easier to pull the wool over people's eyes. So we don't know that much about him. We know he's a Talmud of Volozhin at some point. We know that evidently his name was really Friedlander, and we know they wrote lots of forgeries. Not just this, and the Tosefta and other things. Obviously, he got a kick out of it.
So that's something else that I was.
By the way, this is worthwhile. Something which is worthwhile exploring in general. We know that there were some great forgers in Jewish history. The other one, I'm sure you know about, Rabbi Yehuda Rosenberg, who forged the entire Golem story out of nowhere and other things. So there, it's a special forte. And Rabbi Yosef somewhere says that if you're mechanish a chidush lamito shel Torah, then that's not your own. That's from Sinai. How much time Vasik Osi Chadish goes from Moshe Sinai. But if you come up with sheker, then that's your own chiddush. So evidently they felt, we need our own chidushim.
Yeah, you have the Besamim Reish as well, infamous Shuvas Besamim Reish, and others. So yeah, but first of all, I wanted to read from the Sharblat here. He says, he read his Pirish, Hatzoyer Shlomo Yehuda Samach whatever. Okay, we're not going to get discussion what that stands for, but meaning is it's Sfardi Tahor or Sefer Tev, whatever it is. Behagoyin Marams, that's how Sfardi Mechuna Friedlander. So he made himself out to be this whole Sfardi. So, like you said, we don't know much about him, but which Mesechtas? I mean, I can just say, right? Zvachim Menachas Chulin Becheres is the ones that he published. I mean, where did he claim? What was his story that he unwound this manuscript? What was exactly his story that he sold?
So he claimed that he had a brother who was in Turkey who had the manuscript, and that he found a manuscript, and that he says here the people pressed him, where do you get it? So the Friedlander claimed that since he had only been loaned the original manuscript, he had copied it in stenographic shorthand, incomprehensible to anybody but himself. And when he said that there was a Yaakov Kubi who verified that the manuscript existed, who Friedlander said he was his brother's partner in the search of the manuscript, and a Suleiman Benevisti, who was the heir to the manuscript, who had supposedly loaned it to Friedlander's brother in Izmir. So somebody offered a reward to find these people and check them out. And Friedlander then went to Tavelus and replied that his brother Elio the Yerushalmi had died in Turkey, and that therefore he could no longer produce his brother to verify the origin of the manuscript. So again, nowadays with the communications we have, I don't think this will last very long. But back then, probably a lot of manuscripts were not available. They were distant places. Even to go to the Vatican to get a manuscript, or to Oxford to get a manuscript, would be a very, very difficult thing to do. So obviously, there are people who whose personality was obviously such that he was charismatic enough to convince people that manuscript existed.
And more than that, he actually received haskamas. So which haskamas did he receive? I mean, clearly, a lot of people felt.
The most amazing one is from the Marasham. That the Marasham actually has come and wrote Oris on the Sefer, and it's really incredible. I think what's more amazing is that as the last Sefer in 1930, which was the Sefer, the Sefti still got haskamas. So people didn't remember that 25 years ago we had this tremendous brouhaha on the haskama later on. It's possible that he forged the haskamas. I'm not, he forged the Sefer, he forged the haskamas. But he has from the Marasham and a Rav from Stansilov and the Rav of Satmar at the time, Rabbi Greenwald, before the Satmar Rebbe, obviously. And obviously, he fooled them.
Right, I mean, clearly
most people don't read Sfarad before they give haskamas. Perhaps they didn't read it, but the Marasham wrote an Oretz, so that's very difficult to say.
That's what I'm saying. We know it's not like you're saying it could be on some of the stuff he forged haskamas, but we know here that he got real haskamas. I mean, for example, you bring down there, I mean, the whcih quotes it in I think the Halachos, right? So clearly he wasn't forging everything, because right, what's the story? Where the whcih says he saw Yerushalmi, knew Yerushalmi, right? So sounds like he also somewhat fell for it.
Yeah, he saw the Yerushalmi said that he started putting on B'tulin Leveinu Tam because in the new Yerushalmi on Kodshim, Menachos, so it had a it said that that the order to fill in Rabbeinu Tam. I'm sorry, now, bro. Yeah, I think in Menachos, and its commentary on the Likutei Halachos, he also quotes the Yerushalmi on Kodshim. I heard, I don't think I put this in the article, but I heard once from one of my Rebbein, Rabbi Meir Schlesinger and Shalvim. He said it was a time of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he said Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Shlomo Zalman told him about the Chofetz Chaim having started putting on Rabbeinu Tam because of the Yerushalmi and Kodshim. And Shlomo Zalman asked, how could it be that the Chofetz Chaim fell for this? And he said that the Chofetz Chaim was bribed, not bribed by money, but bribed by his tremendous tzipiyah Yeshua. And he yearned for the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. And he figured that this finding of the Yerushalmi and Kodshim must be part and parcel of the upcoming Geula and the bringing back of the Avodah. So therefore, he was so excited by the possibility of there being Yerushalmi and Kodshim that it kind of blinded him to see that it actually was not authentic.
Now, obviously, we don't have the exact answer to how so many Gedolim fell for it, but something you explore in your article that it's important to point out is that, and this is something you already alluded to, but just how did he this obviously this very talented forger, very knowledgeable person, how did he do this? How did he go and compile Yerushalmi, ad kidei kach, such an extent that people, Gedolim Rabbanim, were falling for it, giving haskamas, learning at Haaretz, but how did he do this? How did he go about compiling this work?
So I think he was obviously a guy and awesome, so maybe he would have been able to do it without the Yefei Naim. But by the time he did, the Yefei Naim was already published. And the Yefei Naim is an amazing tool if you want to forge a Yerushalmi, because the Yefei Naim tells you Sugyas of the Bavli, where you can find the parallel Sugya in the Yerushalmi, and then you can just manipulate it a little bit, and because we find Sugyas Mischalfos in different Mesechtas, and we know that's even the Bavli, certainly Yerushalmi, so therefore you just change a little bit, and then you have a new Yerushalmi. I just saw in the Klali Hashas, I happened to be learning the Klali Hashas for Shmuel Hanogi, the back of Brachas, and the Peirush there, I forget who wrote the Peirush, and he brings down that, if you find Yerushalmi, which is different than the Bavli, so you say it's like an Ikodamri. So we know there are many, and we know there are many sugyas like that. So if you just set up a Yerushalmi sugya to be somewhat like a Bavli, switch the names, make the Shita slightly different, and you have a great Yerushalmi. And there is a Sefer, which again was put out after R Yosef Friedlander, but since he is such a great Olam, he probably could have done that himself. Sefer put out by Menachem Mendel Kasher and the Rambam and Mechilta D'Rashbi. How many sources the Rambam actually had from the Mechilta D'Rashbi, which wasn't available to most Talmidei Chachamim at the time. And the same thing is true about the Yerushalmi. The Rambam has many halachas which people, possibly can. We don't know the exact source, and he found, there's Yerushalmi, which is the Makar of the Rambam. He went backwards to the Rambam, take a look you don't know the source for, and make Yerushalmi out of it. Then there's he also found just took random sugyas and put them in, and also finally when else failed him, he made stuff up. By the way, there's also the end of Brachas. I think it's in the Brachas. It's in the Nida, in the Bavli. There is I'm sorry, not in the Bavli. In the Yerushalmi, the end of Brachas, the end of Nida, things in the Brachas. There is a list of Yerushalmis which we don't have in our Yerushalmi, because we showed him lots of time put Yerushalmi, and we don't have that Yerushalmi. My own suspicion is that whether we show that people who didn't find something in the Bavli, they assume it's in the Yerushalmi. But I said, because there's so many Gemaras which are brought down there, a list with Yerushalmis we don't have, and which again we show him say Yerushalmi. So if you're R Yosef Friedlander, you go and take a few of those Yerushalmis, which we don't know the source, and you put them in the Yerushalmi.
Something that you mentioned right at the beginning, you said after learning Yerushalmi, it's easier to forge Yerushalmi than a Bavli. Is that just did you mean that? Let me clarify. Do you mean that because people don't know about it, so you can trick people, or the actual teichen, you actually can forge it? Is that why?
No, the actual forging, the technique, because the Bavli has the stem of the Gemara, and the stem of the Gemara, the connecting tissue between the memras, which is not attributed, right? As by definition, gives a certain smoothness and a certain texture to the Bavli. That's what makes Bavli much easier to learn than Yerushalmi. The fact that you have the stem of the Gemara, which arranged the questions and the answers and had different generations in conversation with each other and brought different sources, so et cetera, et cetera. There's no stem of the Gemara in the Yerushalmi. It's extremely choppy. So you don't have to emulate the style of the stem of the Gemara. That's an amazing bracha if you're a forger, because if there's no stylistic element which you have to forge, which is very, very subtle and difficult to do.
Right.
Is that clear?
Yeah. So that's interesting. So maybe that's one of the reasons. So when did the first backlash start? When was the first, attack on him? And we'll get to, legends and that kind of thing. But when did the first real pushback on him on this come?
Yeah, relatively early on. As we say, he started off in Hungary, right? And the first time that Rabbi Shlomo Yehuda Greenwald met him was 1907, and in 1908, Rabbi Elgazi Friedlander was living. Shlomo Yehuda Greenwald and Elgazi Friedlander both living in Satmar, and then it seems that started to spread the Yerushalmi out of Hungary and extended to Lithuania. Now, before that, there were rabbis in Hungary also declared a faith. But once it got to Lithuania, he faced a wall of oppositions. And I think also in Poland, like the Kli Chemda, also the various different Talmidei Chachamim who realized that this was a forgery. And already in 1908, he was put on the defensive. Okay, so basically we have the first volume was published in 1905. In 1907, I think it was 1905. No, first one was maybe it's 1906. Maybe it was 1907. I'm sorry. First one was published in 1907, and already in 1908, once it started spreading, there already was controversy.
Right, and now I think there was somebody who was Ritter published something against him, and he wrote, he made up Anaxil. He published under a pseudonym or a forged name, right? That was a rebuttal against him.
Yeah, that probably is the most fun to write these Pashkevilim.
So he definitely right. He definitely wrote back. I mean, so what was the end? End game? How did he really get fully exposed and have to recant? And that was the end of the whole thing.
He never fully recanted. There never was a public statement that I forged the thing, because Rabbi Shlomo Yehuda Greenwald says he admitted to me that he forged it. But that as I wrote here, in as late as 1911, in the whcih Yisrael Encyclopedia, they talked about the Yerushalmi on Chulin, which had come out recently. But obviously the Gedolim had seen that there were too many new things and too many, on the other hand, discrepancies, which led them to believe it's a forgery. And as you said, we could get to the legends, but there were several obviously things which Gedolim who are familiar with the style of Yerushalmi picked up on and understood something is off here.
Who were the names? Do you have any names of like Gedolim or Rabbanim that we know of that came out and said, this is fake, this is bogus? Or there was just because nowadays everybody's running around and this one and that one, somehow everybody exposed it, but clearly that wasn't exactly the case.
Well, the Ribaz, Natnei Nezer, the Rogatchover is most famously the Ger Rebbe, the Or Sameach, the Rebbe Meir Chiyov Ostrovtza, and as I mentioned, Klichemda, and there was a person who was the head of the Agudas Rabbanim in Hungary. I'm not familiar with him. His name was Rabbi Avram Frankel. So there were people all over the world who started noticing that this is probably not the thing.
Right. I think the Garabim and Imr Emes, I saw that he was like an expert. He had a massive library. He was like an expert in manuscripts and these kind of things. I don't know if there's any that I saw brought down. He knew because the manuscript, but he didn't see the manuscripts. I don't know where that.
You know what? Something which I should really do. I think HebrewBooks.org does have the Yerushalmi on Kodshim, and it says there, Mizuyaf. But why it's something which would I probably should do someday is now that I know somewhat the Yerushalmi, I could probably go back and see what I can see myself. I wrote the article. I was a youngster and I never went to Yerushalmi, so I didn't have to rely on what the other people say. Now I should try and go back and see if I can figure out for myself. So,
right. Now we should mention, the thing with Imre Emes, I think I saw the Avat Shalom, Kilot Yisrael, they published his like a catalog of his library that he had. It's called Ol Ram, and in there they mentioned this. I don't know, that's in there that I saw. But what's with the famous legend of the Rogatchover that he said, right? That has to be a new Tana. I don't remember exactly. I mean, is there any truth? Do we have a source for this, or this just became the thing in yeshivas?
No, I don't know if we actually have a source for it. I think it's just the Turkish Balpeh. If I can go off on a tangent for a minute, there was I think one of the problems of the people had with making of a gadol with Rav Nosson Kamenetsky was that there were certain things which are supposed to remain Turkish Balpeh and not be Turkish B'Ksav. And this, I think, is one of those things which was a part of the lore of Turkish Balpeh in yeshivas as opposed to Turkish B'Ksav. Not that this one is relatively innocuous, but no, the Rogatchover does have a chuvas in which he says that they the Yerushalmi is forged, but now he doesn't mention this Nakuda, which is the legend. He has other rayas, but not this raya. But as you began saying, the Rogatchover is supposed to have said that it's a forgery because it's too good, because there's no Mesechta in Shas which does not have a unique name of a Tana or Moira which does not appear elsewhere in Shas. And the Yerushalmi and Kodshim has done so well that every Amoira or Tana who appears in these Mesechtas is somebody who we already seen other Mesechtas.
Right. So, just to finish,
I don't know if besides maybe Rav Abadi will say, I don't know anybody besides Rogatchover who could have done that. So,
and maybe Rav Chaim Kanievsky,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's enough. Like you said, there's not many that can say something like that. So, I guess to finish off on this interesting Elgazi Friedlander-Elgazi, whatever. Like you said, he did Tesef to other things. I mean, was his other stuff proven to be forgeries? What else did he publish in his life? What other works do we have from him?
They're also suspect. First of all, he wrote a lot of these in the early years and earlier in 1889 to 1893. So he published Tosefta on Zoyim and Nashim with his own commentary, Shlomo. I said that was his last book. That was not his last book. Last book was also Shlomo and Tosefta, but I guess a different volume. But in any event, this first Shlomo, also there was a Rabbi Yanovsky who wrote against him, and Friedlander replied with a volume called Kesher Boigdim, right? It's which kind of like Anei Seal, the same type of title, and so later on, also Yanovsky and the Friedlander had another one of these discussions, and Friedlander wrote a book called Late Hayayin. So this is I don't know if anybody really has the psychological assessment of what made him who he was. He had kids. I don't know if he has any descendants alive today, but he certainly is a fascinating character.
Yeah, I mean, those titles are real heavy, muscular.
Yes, yeah.
real heavy stuff. Yeah, so he
wrote another sefer against Hasidus. What do you call that? Also, some Leitzonastic title.
Right. I mean, and then you end off your article. Just with Enigma, we don't really know why he did this. I mean, was it fame? Was it something else that he was seeking to undermine? Like I said, maybe make fun. I don't know what he was trying to. We obviously can't know that. So first of all, where can the listeners? I'll put a link. Is the article on your academia page? Where can the article be found?
It's on my academia page. Yeah.
So I can put in a link to that. And just as we end off here, I did mention, and
you should also put in the link to the Hebrew books, to the
Yerushalmi. Yes, very good. I'll do that as well. People can see that. Let me ask you, Joe, as we finish up here. I mean, I did mention in the beginning that you more recently published a new edition, pretty recently, of your Erev book. Just if you want to mention, maybe a different time we can do an episode on that. But just if you want to mention to listeners, what that is, and any other.
My so to speak, magnum opus to date is my Sefer on Eruvin in English, the contemporary Eruvin in modern metropolitan areas. If you want to write a book, which Sfarim don't sell very much, but if you want to write a Sefer which tells it all, you should write a controversial topic in English, not in Hebrew, because my Hebrew Sfarim, nowhere near as popular. So it's about the many different issues in Eruvin, which of course is a topic in of itself. And the fourth edition which came out for Daf Yomi Eruvin, has many more additions than to the earlier volumes, and lots of pictures, including color pictures. And I think I've gotten over the years many calls, emails, letters about how it helped people to learn Hechoseh, to learn Eruvin in ways they never were able to understand before. And Baruch Hashem.
Are you working on any current either Hebrew Sfarim or English books now, or no?
Right now, I was hoping this summer to start writing a Perush on Yerushalmi, but things came up. I have notes on the whole Yerushalmi, but I'm not able to write the Sefer yet. I hope that to be for my next volume. And in the meantime, most of the time I publish articles. The last article I published was a Journal of Contemporary Society on COVID virus and Shomer B'Soyim Hashem, which was a topic in and of itself, very important topic. But Yirtzeh Hashem, I hope that Kodesh Baruch Hu will give me the Menuchas HaNefesh and the Yishuv Adas to write a Sefer in Yerushalmi and other Chiburim Mo'ilim.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.